This episode of the podcast is brought to you by J.D. Chapman Insurance Agency. Are you an aspiring business owner or entrepreneur looking to be part of New York's multi-billion-dollar cannabis industry? If so, the decisions you make in these early stages are imperative to your future success. And I'll tell you from personal experience that you will face risk on a daily basis. So it's important to have a comprehensive insurance program in place with a trusted, reliable partner. J.D. Chapman offers special insurance for cannabis growers, medical and adult use dispensaries, edibles manufacturers, testing labs, ancillary businesses, and more. Available coverage includes general liability, product liability, excess liability, and workers' comp. In this exciting and rapidly growing industry, it's important to have a partner you can trust. Contact J.D. Chapman today at 315-986-4062 for all your cannabis insurance needs. J.D. Chapman, from seed to sale, they have you covered.
The views and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to the hosts and their guests and do not reflect the views of any outside institutions unless explicitly stated.
What's up, everyone? My name is Steve Vanderwall, and I'm the host of Cannabis Cum Laude, a podcast devoted entirely to cannabis. This podcast will cover a full spectrum of topics, including cultivation, business, medicine, politics, culture, advocacy, and everything in between. Because let's face it, the cannabis industry is very complicated. It's robust, and it has a ton of moving parts. So it's going to be my job to help you understand it a little bit better. So tune in every week for a brand new episode. And if you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. And if you really like the show and are interested in sponsoring, please shoot me an email at logistics@cannabiscumlaude.com. Now enjoy the show. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Cannabis Cum Laude. Super excited to be here today because my guest today is Drew Greco, and he is the founder and owner of Green Star Consulting, which was founded back in 2020. Drew has been cultivating commercial cannabis in regulated markets for over a decade. He started his cannabis career in Colorado as a trimmer and worked his way up to the cultivation manager position. He has been managing licensed cultivation facilities ever since, helping to open new gardens in California, Massachusetts, and Nevada. His full-time experience in large-scale gardens has allowed him to develop proven SOPs for cultivation, including workflow, irrigation strategy, and IPM strategy. Greco believes that the combination of synthetic-based fertilizers and organic inoculants creates the perfect recipe for clean, potent cannabis. The partnerships that he has developed through his career with nutrient, soilless media, environmental control, and data tracking software manufacturers has given him the ability to provide top-tier cultivation goods and services at a competitive price. Drew, so excited to have you here today. Thanks for making time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, a lot to unpack. Quite the resume. I'm really excited to have you. I'm a small scale grower, and I wanted to kind of get an idea of where you started and how did you get to where you are today?
So I grew up on the East Coast. I was born in Massachusetts, moved to Virginia when I was very young, and then went to college in North Carolina. And that's really kind of where my cannabis use and experience started. I, sold weed on the East Coast through college to pay bills and stuff like that, and grew a couple of crops in my closet. But it was just so illegal there. It was so scary to be doing that I needed to make a change if I wanted to keep going in that direction. So at the end of 2011, my brother came to visit me from Virginia down in North Carolina, and we were talking about how medical in California and Colorado was big, and Colorado was talking about legalizing for recreational use. So we just decided that if we wanted to actually pursue this career path, that we needed to get out to Colorado and be in a safe place to actually cultivate cannabis and learn about cannabis. So I moved to northern Colorado in 2012 and got a job at a hydroponics supply store. and just started getting on all the forums online and checking out how to grow and, reading these different forums, asking questions from people online, and then picking the brains of all the growers that would come into the hydroponic shop. And there was a owner of a small dispensary in northern Colorado that came and got his supplies from us. So every time he would come in, I would just beg him, man, like this is what I want to do with my life. Please let me just come and trim for you. I want to learn. I want to know more about this industry. And he finally gave in and gave me a job as a trimmer in his little operation. And a couple weeks after I started, one of the growers quit, and he knew that I wanted to be in the garden. So he moved me into the garden. And I worked there for about a year and learned a lot about nutrient recipes and facility flow and schedule and all that stuff from that space. And then a girl that I was dating at the time moved down to Denver from northern Colorado, and that's where all the big grows and all the legitimate businesses were. So I found a job down there and moved down to Denver. And really my first position in a big cannabis garden, it was 100,000 square feet. I was just a general laborer, changing out reservoirs, cleaning reservoirs, cleaning the hydrogen to reuse because they recycled the hydrogen that they were using. Just very manual labor, basic stuff, and moved my way up from general laborer to a shift lead. And then at that time, they weren't paying very well. I mean, I was making $11 an hour living in Denver, barely paying my bills. So I found another company that was paying a little bit more for a cultivation assistant position. And then I kind of jumped around to like 3 or 4 different companies, just trying to get my pay up. And then eventually was offered a management position in Denver. And I managed a 30,000 square foot garden there for a little over a year and a half. We had 5 flower rooms and 2 veg rooms, and I oversaw everything from cloning up until harvest, dry cure, and then there was a separate manager for the packaging department. But that was really where I learned and kind of honed in SOP skills with 2 of my really good, still close friends that were working with me. And from there, after the year and a half, the owner sold the building and the license, and the new owners had a cultivation crew that they brought in. So I went out to California for a little bit and helped another friend set up a brand new garden, and then got a job in Massachusetts with a really big startup company, and moved out there to manage their garden, help train the staff, develop the SOPs specifically for their building. And then I was there for 2 years, just shy of 2 years. And, Massachusetts is cold and wet, didn't really agree with my living style. So I took a job with a friend who had a consulting company out here in Las Vegas. Came out here and was managing a couple gardens for them for a little over a year. And then the same thing happened. We had a management service contract with a building owner, a license owner, and he sold his license and his building, and the new owners brought in a new cultivation team. So for the past, 8 months, I've really been focusing just on my consulting company.
So tell me so Green Star Grower, tell me exactly, what are the core competencies of your consulting business?
So I do some remote management. Mostly I am involved right now with facility design, and then providing SOPs, helping to hire staff and training staff. I like to work with companies and help them find the right fit for their lead grower, for their managers, and for their general laborer positions, and then be their hands-on to help train all of those positions for the first 8 to 12 months until they get into a swing of things and are able to take over. And then I kind of move on to a different project.
Now, you had mentioned one of the things that you do is facility design. Talk to me a little bit about what goes into the design process for a commercial cultivation facility.
Sure. And when I say I do facility design, it's really just consulting on facility design. I'm not an engineer.
Sure.
I'm not crunching the numbers for HVAC and all that. I have enough of a background in construction that I can go through and double check the engineer's work and make sure that they're on the right track and they're designing the facility to the right specifications. But I am not single-handedly designing cultivation facilities by any means. But usually the process for a big cultivation facility, of course, first thing you need to pick the building or pick your land where you're going to build the building. Most states or counties, that's a prerequisite for you to get your license anyway. You have to have your building already picked when you apply for your license. And then after that, you're going to be working with engineers, mechanical engineers and architects and building drawers to come up with the floor plan design of your facility. And that's really where I come in to help make sure that the engineers are designing things from a cultivator standpoint. There's not a lot of design firms in the country right now that have cultivation experience just because it's such a brand new industry. So a lot of these engineering firms are designing these buildings just based off of a warehouse, like a supply warehouse that they've designed before. So a lot of the problems I've seen in some of the facilities I've worked in are undersized HVAC, improper airflow, improper pipe sizing for the irrigation design. So I kind of facilitate and help the engineers design all of that properly from a cultivation standpoint.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're the biggest, baddest HVAC company in the world or contracting company, if you don't understand, if you're not thinking like a cultivator, there's some very simple things in terms of garden efficiency and plumbing and the routing of plumbing, especially, so that's really interesting. And especially that we're just starting to see a couple of these firms come online now. I mean, who knows what it's going to be like in 5 to 10 years? It's going to explode.
Yeah.
So, what are some in terms of HVAC, in terms of, let me back that up a little bit. I like to talk in a lot of our network is focused on more of like the craft, smaller scale stuff, 5 to 20,000 square feet, maybe even smaller. With a relatively limited footprint, how do you think is the best way to set up a commercial facility that's obviously both designed to grow really, really high quality cannabis, but also is that, you have enough flowering rooms and a big enough veg room and enough packaging room and enough drying, it's all time management. How would you, when you approach this design process, how do you look at setting up, without giving your formula away, what a little bit is kind of the formula that you look to maximize space and efficiency in a certain square footage?
So a lot of people are moving to these multi-tiered rooms with, stacked growing. I'm really not a fan of that. I think it's still kind of in the experimental phase and people are finding what works and finding what doesn't, and they're spending a lot of money to find that. As far as, design and layout, the general rule is you need about 20 to 25% of your canopy square footage designated to your veg room. And depending on the overall square footage, you can go a little bit smaller if you have the room size to stack tiers in veg. It's a lot easier to stack tiers in veg than it is in flower. There's not as much canopy. There's not the big buds that can get moldy in there. It's a lot easier to manage veg. So I'm all about going vertical in veg and cutting down your square footage for veg and then using more of that square footage for flower. Mm-hmm. But I'm still a fan of just a single tier. It took me until last year to even get on board with LEDs because the technology is finally catching up to what the high intensity lights are able to produce. And as far as layout, I love facilities that are perfect squares. Yeah. I like to have my clone and my veg right in the middle, and then your flower rooms kind of around that perimeter. It just makes an easier workflow where everything is being started in the middle of that building, and then it's just an easy path to walk around and load the flower rooms. I've been in a lot of facilities that are set up in huge rectangles, and you have your veg and clone on one side, and you're walking almost a mile to get down to a flower room or to load your dry rooms and stuff like that. And labor is the most expensive overhead cost in any cultivation facility, no matter what size it is. So being mindful of how you design that and making sure that it is efficient for workflow is going to be a huge cost saver down the road.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine some of the labor costs on a facility like 100,000 square foot. I mean, I just think about things like defoliing and trimming and all that stuff. I mean, it's even on a small, my little 3-lighter was. Right. It's a lot of work, it's right. All of this, especially when you're in that business of craft cannabis and top tier flower, you can't cut corners. And a lot of that involves hands-on labor, and it gets very expensive.
Yes, absolutely.
And you had talked a lot about another thing that Green Star does is task management and some of the things that you've done. Tasks like we said, defoliing or trimming, harvesting, filling reses, cleaning. How do you approach task management when working with a commercial facility? What are some things that you like to think about? How do you prioritize tasks? How do you communicate these tasks? Kind of give me a little bit of some insight on how you do that.
The tasks that I prioritize are always plant-based tasks. We're doing things in these grow rooms based off of the hormones that are going through the plant. So there's a proper time to defoliate your plant. There's a proper time to prune your plant, to top your plant. And then when it comes down to it, there's a proper time to harvest your plant. So it's really not like every time we load a room, we're pruning on day 8 this time and day 12 next time or something like that. So it's pretty easy to set your task schedule for your veg and your flower rooms. The hard part comes in with these huge facilities where you have 1,500 to 3,000 plants in a room, and you have to defoliate that entire room within 2 days, and that's why the labor cost is so high, because you have to have enough people in there to actually get in and pick all of these leaves off those plants. I use a software company called Trim, and they first and foremost are a task management and data collection software company. They have recently integrated with METRC in most states, and they integrate with a few different control companies. I know they work with GrowLink, Trollmaster, and Argus. So if you have those control systems in your facility, they can connect to those sensors, and you can have one program that sees all of your environmentals, all of your irrigation, and be able to delegate tasks and track that data throughout the grow cycle. And after that, when you're trying to select what strains you want to grow, and it helps with training staff as well, because each individual person gets a message on their phone in the morning and tells them what tasks that they're assigned for the day. So before each task, they can start the task on their phone, and when they're finished, they can stop the task on their phone. So after a few runs, managers can go through this software and look it over and say, Billy took 20 minutes longer than everyone else on defoliating these past 3 times we defoliated. I know I have to go in and sit with him and motivate him or explain to him how to be more efficient in that process. But he's faster than everyone else in this process. So I know that I'm going to assign that process to him most times, because it's going to get done the best. And also being able to go back and look at what tasks are taking overall the most time during a cycle, and finding ways to make them more efficient. Trim has been a lifesaver for me personally, because it allows me to do a remote facility management. So a lot of the new gardens coming up, are in Oklahoma, Minnesota, Missouri's coming online now, and those are states that I personally don't want to move to, and I don't want to relocate or be there full time. So that allows me to go do a site visit when these major tasks are coming up. So like cloning for the first time, transplanting for the first time, pruning a room for the first time, and then harvesting the plants. I can go be there for that week or those number of days and be hands-on with the crew and show them what to do. And then the rest of the time I'm available for FaceTime or phone calls if they have any questions that they need. But I can actually log into the trim program and monitor that facility from anywhere in the world and see what their humidity and temperature is at any time.
That's huge.
See that the irrigation schedules that I've set are actually firing and feeding the plants when they're supposed to. Then, if I see a spike in humidity or temperature one day, I can call the lead grower that's in there and say, hey, we got this spike last night. Can you go check the HVAC units and make sure that they're running properly? And kind of nip problems like that in the bud as soon as they occur. And it also allows me to delegate tasks to the entire staff. So, I can get on my phone or my computer and review the tasks that were completed for that day and then schedule the next day overnight. And at 8:00 in the morning, each employee at that facility will get a push notification on their phone and they'll know exactly what they're doing for the day.
Easy peasy. A lot better than spreadsheets and whiteboards, huh?
It is, man. And that's what it used to be. I mean, when at that first facility I was managing in Colorado, I had to be there 30 minutes to an hour before everyone else was there in order to double check what was done the day before, write out everyone's assignments for the day and kind of schedule the day. And trim has just saved me so much time in that department. It's really been a lifesaver.
You had mentioned that it integrates with not only a bunch of other Stencil programs like Trollmaster and Growling, but METRC. New York is coming online right now, as we know. We're awaiting regs, which we heard could be out May. License roll out by the end of the year. It's likely that this is going to be the primary compliance program. What is METRC and how does it work?
So METRC is a seed to sale tracking system. Each individual plant in your garden that is over 8 inches tall, that's the regulation in most states, has to have an actual RFID tag on that plant so that someone from the city or state can come in at any time unannounced and use their RFID scanner and scan the tag on that plant and see that it is in the place that it is supposed to be and that product is not being diverted to the black market or to where it's not supposed to be. So essentially, when a facility is first set up in a state, METRC usually grants a grace period for that facility to get genetics into the system and get the system set up and started. After that grace period goes by, it's usually, I think, 90 days. They give like 3 months for you to get your facility up and running and get all of your strains into the system. After that 90 days, you technically can't bring any new genetics into your facility unless it is already in the METRC system in that state. That's honestly one of the biggest problems with METRC and one of the regulations that really needs to be looked at and something kind of needs to change to allow people to bring in new genetics to their facilities from seed instead of having to buy clones from someone else or seeds from someone else. It is still possible to bring in new genetics. It's just kind of a gray area. And with the amount of money that people are spending on these licenses and spending on setting up these facilities, it's a scary thing to have to do something that's in a gray area to bring in new genetics and risk being fined for it. I personally haven't heard of anyone that has ever been fined for bringing in new genetics. The loopholes are pretty wide, and it's really not that hard to bring in new genetics, but it's still scary. And I think that they should review that and come up with a process and a approved way to bring in new genetics. But back to the system, it's tracking all of the plants in your facility, all the way from cloning them off of a mother plant to harvesting, to curing, to being packaged, and then being sold to whatever licensed facility that you are selling your product to.
Yeah, I've heard mixed reviews. I mean, it's kind of just the reality. Compliance is the name of the game in the legal market. I've heard mixed reviews on METRC. Overall, how has it been working with this platform? Is it challenging? Do you find it easy? Is it expensive? What's that about?
The program itself is pretty easy to navigate through. They've made it quite user friendly. The problems that most people run into are with their servers. They just don't have enough server bandwidth to cover all of the people trying to use METRC at the same time. There's a lot of delays, and that spinning wheel of death shows up on your screen all of the time, and you're kind of at the mercy of their servers. And with these regulations, any of the movements that you do in METRC are supposed to be done in one day. So, if you start moving your plants at 3:00 in the afternoon in METRC and you get that spinning wheel of death, you're stuck there until you're able to move those plants, or you risk being fined for moving them half of the plants in one day and half of the plants in the other day. But as far as being user-friendly, it is a very user-friendly program. Their training lacks a little bit. METRC's official training platform is YouTube. They just have videos that they screen share and walk you through all of the processes. And they're not state specific. METRC's training is just for the METRC program. So the little differences between states and regulations, you kind of just have to figure that out on your own. And that's where I think a lot of the people in new states that are, especially Oklahoma, where they haven't had to use METRC for the past 2 years or however long it's been, they have like 60 more days, and everyone has to be trained up on METRC. All of their inventory has to be in METRC properly and in the right places, or else they risk being fined. So I'm working with another consulting company that really just does the compliance side of things. We're offering some webinars. There's links on all of my social media right now. And we're focusing on providing training to Oklahoma processors and producers to make sure that they're setting up their METRC system compliantly, so that once the regulations come into play, that they're good to go. They're not going to risk any kind of fines or anything like that.
Yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be on everybody's mind if you're looking at any sort of cultivation, really any sort of supply chain license.
Absolutely.
Especially, there's going to be a lot of red tape in New York. This is just part of the realities of a legal market. But METRC is going to be a part of everybody's life who participates in the industry. So, start doing your research, start getting familiar. The more you know, the more you grow. But it is a reality that we are all facing as a new market in New York. I want to talk about briefly, not briefly, there was a really cool case study that you were involved in that I came upon on your website that was a trim case study. It was really cool. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. The facility that I worked at in Massachusetts, that's how I was introduced to trim. Their IT guy had found them at a conference somewhere, I believe, and he saw how much time it could save us on task management and data collection. So they were ready to implement that before I was even hired. But, I think we did the case study over the first 6 months that we were operational, and we tracked, how much time we were saving by not having to come in an hour early and clear whiteboards and rewrite these whiteboards, and not having to walk around the facility for 10 minutes to find an employee and tell them that that the next task that they were doing was this, and this is when it was supposed to start. That it was all in one place, streamlined, where everyone could access it during the day and everyone knew what they were going to do. So I think it ended up being about like a 20% time save by using trim. Everything was just streamlined. It was all in one place. Again, not walking around the facility for hours out of the day trying to find people. Just having that program has saved so much time, so much labor, and so much cost for these big facilities.
And even if it's saving a couple minutes per person per day, that compounds a lot over a year. I mean, thousands and thousands of dollars. And, when you're now all of a sudden getting taxed like crazy and you have all these operational costs and energy costs and, every dollar really does count. So it is important to turn those, minutes to seconds and be able to trim some of that fat. No pun intended. So a question that we have been having in kind of the advocacy realm in New York State between legacy market operators and local up to state politicians. One thing I will mention is that in Rochester specifically, and I can't really say I don't know much about the other bigger cities, but in Rochester specifically, we have pretty much all of our local and state representatives in our district are very pro-cannabis, are all rowing in the same direction, all want this to be a craft, community-focused industry. Like we are very well and positively represented. And one of the conversations that we keep having is how do we bring legacy market operators into the legal market? Whether that's through incentives, we don't really know. We have a couple ideas. The reality is not many states have really built that bridge. As somebody who's been in the game a long time and has seen this industry in different states and different ways it's been done, what do you think is the best way to bring legacy market operators into the legal market?
I'm a huge fan of the micro licenses that states are allowing. The cheaper application rates or application costs and the smaller square footage size is allowing more mom and pop facilities to open up. The downside to that is just that there's these huge multi-state operators that are trying to get into every market that they can. They understand that they are going to be pretty much just spending money for the next however many years until there's some kind of federal regulation and some kind of national oversight and interstate commerce, and they're backed and ready to just spend money until everyone else completely falls off and they're the only people left. And it's really hard to compete with that. So I think the micro licenses are really one of the only ways right now that is allowing smaller size grows and mom and pop craft farmers to get into the game. The other side of that equation is the marketing. If the marketing and the quality of your product, if you have a good product and you are able to grab people's attention and point them to the right place to pick up your product, I think those facilities and those companies are always going to survive. I really think the industry is going to end up going the same direction as the alcohol industry. There's going to be huge multi-state operators that are producing a subpar or average product, and then there's going to be your craft brewers and your craft growers that are creating a top tier product, and it's going to be so in demand that they're selling out all of their crops at every time.
We see that here in Rochester in the Finger Lakes region. I mean, this is the craft beer and wine capital of the state. I mean, if you drive down Seneca Lake, it's literally winery. They're all beautiful. They all are thriving, and they're all within like a couple 100 yards of each other. And it's because they all got their own taste, their own flavor, their own vibe.
Right.
Same with Rochester. I mean, Rochester's got a craft brewery, probably 10 craft breweries within a couple square miles of the downtown. And they're awesome. They all collaborate. They do collaborative beers. It's a very,
Yeah.
and guess what? They're all crushing it. Why wouldn't
Yeah.
the same go
Yeah.
for cannabis? I tell people, master your craft. If be focused on, if you can produce the best possible product you can, like you said, it will always sell. There's a brewery, Mortalis. It's a local, really sought after. They have like some of the best sour beers you'll ever have. And they
Yep.
have, I think it's every Friday or every other Friday, they do like a new product drop. Every single Friday, they have a line out the door and around the corner, sold out. The same's going to go for cannabis. I mean, if you got proprietary, tried and true genetics, you could quite frankly, you could build your whole career with one or two strains if they're really, really good. So I always tell people, stay small, focus on your craft, dial it in. Because if you try to compete, tanking your prices, like you said, and I've never, ran a huge facility by any means. So I always speculate, but like from these huge 100,000 square foot facilities, how can you achieve that super top tier, AAA quality in that size of a building? Is it possible?
It's hard. It is very hard, but it is possible. It comes down to proper design of the facility, being able to manage your rooms. The environment of the rooms that the cannabis grows in is one of the most important factors. The inputs that you are feeding your plants is one of the most important factors. And there are a lot of high quality nutrient companies that are producing a great nutrient that is all around food source for the plants that isn't a crazy overhead cost. I grow with salts just because it is, I believe right now it's more cost effective, and that's how I've built my SOPs. I do 100% believe in organic cultivation. I do believe that someone that is growing properly with organic standards is going to create a better product than someone that is growing completely synthetically.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do unless you are setting up your facility from the start to grow in that manner. And with regulations and the microbial testing and stuff like that, bringing in raw organic materials that can easily produce mold spores and fungus spores and bacteria spores, and having that in your facility is really, really dangerous in my opinion at this time, because the testing standards are so strict. The testing standards for cannabis are stricter than any food testing anywhere in the country. The bacteria and mold and yeast testing parameters are lower than any meat packing plant in the country. So unless you've designed your facility to where all of that stuff is going to be in one place that can't be cross-contaminated into your rooms or into any other part of the facility, you're risking failing, and you're risking not being able to bring your product to market. But yeah, it's definitely going to go the way of craft brewers. There's so many strains on the market now. Like you said, you can have one or two strains that you grow top tier, and as long as no one else or not a lot of people in your region or your state have those strains at that quality, people are going to find it. The cannabis community is very close knit. Everyone talks to each other. Everyone shares the strains that they're smoking, the effects that it had on them, the prices, the quality of the cannabis. And it gets around quick. It gets around really, really fast, especially with the internet and, Reddit and Instagram and the different forums. If people are finding something that works for them and that they want to share with their friends, it's easy to do that. And it's easy for people to find that product.
Absolutely. So we're coming up to the end on time. I wanted to ask you, and you had already mentioned you like salts and some organic inoculants. Are you a soil guy? Are you a cocoa, hydro? What does your kind of optimal setup look like?
For larger facilities, I like to go with cocoa. I have experience growing in rock wool, very limited experience growing in soil. I think that the organic makeup of cocoa coir allows uh, beneficial bacteria and the microorganisms in the rhizosphere to thrive more than in rock wool. And I really believe that that is what brings you higher terpene content and better taste and flavor in your final product. I've done side by sides with cocoa and rock wool in the same room with the same nutrients. And in my experience, the stuff grown in cocoa always comes out tasting better and smelling better and more trichome coverage, just from an eyeball test. So I understand the benefits of rock wool. There's not the pith coming off of the cocoa that can clog up your air filters and clog up your drains and make a mess on your table where mold and mildew can thrive and produce. So it is a little bit cleaner, but I really think that the benefit of being able to produce a healthy rhizosphere in cocoa just gives a better final product.
That is generally what I hear for most experienced cultivators. And I think that makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned earlier, you had just, not recently, but relatively recently, had made the switch to LEDs. What's your feedback on, kind of the old school CMH lights versus new school LEDs?
I was always a huge fan of using HID metal halide lights with CMH lights, kind of creating a spectrum that produces more trichomes, more terpene content. And the new LED technology that's come out in really the past 2 years is definitely competing, if not completely smashing away the results from those HID lights. They're now able to do it with lower electricity costs, saving people, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in electricity costs. You don't have to replace the bulbs every 6 months like you do in an HID light, so you're not paying the extra, tens of thousands of dollars in bulb costs on huge facilities. And again, it comes back to the employee costs. You're not having to pay an employee, $20 an hour to go around and change out these bulbs for 8 hours a day every 6 months.
Interesting.
The spectrum of the LEDs is creating more trichome coverage end product. It's bringing out higher terpene content in plants. And honestly, it's increasing yield as well because they're able to get to that light intensity and get to that spectrum without creating as much heat. So you're saving on HVAC costs because you don't have to cool your room quite as hard as you would with those high wattage HID lights. So the LED technology has really come in to its own. It's come into play. And if anyone is building a facility now or looking to in the near future, LED is definitely the way to go. It's way cheaper. Not upfront. I think the upfront cost is a little bit more, but you're going to save that. You're going to make that upfront cost back within the matter of months.
Yeah, and I know that especially the regulators in New York State are really pushing sustainability as being one of the pillars of the program. And I know that likely from a licensing perspective, if you had two identical business plans or license applications, but one facility had, old school, more energy intensive lights and one was outfitted with LEDs, the LEDs would probably get a better look.
Absolutely. And
So
from a safety standpoint too, I've been in multiple facilities with HID lights where something happened. We had a short in one of our grow rooms in Colorado, and when the lights came on in the morning, a bulb burst and shot sparks down on the table, and those plastic tables catch on fire like that. And I came in to do a room check at 8 o'clock in the morning when the lights came on, and smelled something funny, and looked in the back of the room, and there were flames coming off of the table.
Jeez.
And I had to run in there with the fire extinguisher and put out a fire on the table. And I mean, it's a huge problem, and something that you're not going to have to experience with LEDs.
yeah, absolutely agree. So last question before we wrap up. What's something that you are currently working on that you're excited about?
Helping a company in St. Louis right now, the St. Louis Cannabis Collective. They are operational in St. Louis right now. They have a few stores, and they make an amazing solventless product. They're currently just buying wholesale from other licensed gardens in the state and creating an amazing solventless product. And we're in the process of right now designing a cultivation facility just for them, so that they will have their own product to make their solventless from.
Awesome.
So I'm working with their engineer and architecture team right now to design the layout of the facility, pick the proper equipment as far as tables, lighting, fans, irrigation, and environmental controls. And then once they get up and running, I'll be helping them hire staff and implementing my SOPs to train the staff for probably the first 8 to 12 months, and just get them up and running as smoothly as possible.
That sounds awesome. Sounds really exciting.
Yeah,
you'll have to keep us updated on how that goes.
Absolutely.
Well, Drew, thank you seriously so much for coming on the show. You are clearly a wealth of knowledge with a ton of experience. I know that as a New Yorker, we're all looking forward to this industry, and having people like you that have been there and done it to lean on and to listen to is tremendously helpful. So thank you for sharing, and we hope to get you back on the show sometime in the future.
Definitely. Thank you for having me, man. I had fun.
And lastly, where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram at Green Star Grower. My website is greenstargrower.com. I have a LinkedIn page as well. But if you go to my Instagram, you can see a lot of the projects that I've worked on in the past, and just kind of follow my experience from the past few years.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to put your contact or your website and your Instagram handle in the show notes so people can access you and check out what you're doing. So thank you again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. It was an awesome episode. Everybody, thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Cannabis Cum Laude. We're here with the Green Star Grower, Drew Greco, dropping some serious knowledge today. Drew, thanks again.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week. Thanks to our friends here at Rockbox Recording and Production in Rochester, New York. They are a full professional podcast and video studio designed by a radio guy for podcasters. Audio, video, voiceovers, editing, whatever. Mouth off at Rockbox at rockbox.com.
You can follow Cannabis Cum Laude on LinkedIn and all other social media platforms, as well as Cannabuzz. And if you'd like to help support the show, search up Cannabis Cum Laude on Patreon. And of course, all of those links are in the show notes. Thanks for watching and listening.